what is going on, because it seems to me that we have an enormous threat to women's sport around the world by making it not fair, by having men competing against women. And at the weekend, we went to, Steve Oliver organised a great competition of jiu-jitsu, and I watched it. It was fantastic. And when you look at the sports, to make it fair, to make it interesting, to make the kids compete, they do them by age, they do sports by sex, and where it matters, they do it by weight, and then they can do it by level of skill, so that the kids all get a go, that there's a good competition, and they can develop and have fun and have a chance of winning. And what I notice about the kids is they don't mind losing, but my girls have a huge sense of fairness, right? About this is fair, this is not fair. And if they apply the rules that are now we see around the world, where men can pretend to be a woman, or a boy can pretend to be a girl and come on the mat or into the water or onto the cycle, my girls wouldn't last in that sport because they'd think it's not fair. And what I don't understand is if 9 and 10-year-old girls can see what's fair in sport, how come our administrators can't see it? And we know why people aren't speaking out, because we see what happens to J.K. Rowling. Famous and rich, you get attacked. Well, this morning we're in for a treat because we're going to learn to understand this, and we're going to be talking with two very, very brave women who are speaking out, and they're joining us now. And I'm going to start, Ro, with you. Good morning, Ro.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm very well. Now, you're Ro Edge. As it works out, I have to jump between you and Candice, and I'll do that as best I can because of the technology that we're using. And you have formed and representing Save Women's Sport Australasia. First of all, tell us what that is.
So basically, Save Women's Sport Australasia was set up to protect the female sex category in sport. So we've started seeing around the world the impact of male transgender athletes participating in female sport. I mean, we've got our own examples here in New Zealand with Hubbard competing at the 2018 Commonwealth Games, winning gold at the 2019 Pacific Games, and then going on to the Olympics, taking the spot of female athletes. We've also had Kate Weatherly, who transitioned from participating as an average male athlete to winning the National Mountain Bike and Downhill competition in the female category literally within months. And so all of this started raising concerns about basically the undermining of the female category. But also, too, this was further raised because we've got such a huge increase in young people now identifying as trans. And so the implications for sport is actually massive.
Yes. Now, just give us a bit on your background, Ro. You're a sportswoman yourself?
I've played sport. I wouldn't call myself a sportswoman, but I have a niece who's an Olympian. I had a daughter who's went to the US on a college scholarship, a sports mad family. So yeah, sports is something that we're really passionate about, and preserving fairness. If you don't have fairness in competition, it just undermines everything.
Well, we've seen examples here in New Zealand of women who have dedicated their life to their sport and to doing well, who have been unfairly knocked out because they're competing against a man.
Yeah, we have. There's a number of examples.
And that sends a horrific signal back to every young woman and girl who's competing in a sport and thinking they might get serious.
Yeah, it does. And if you're brave enough to speak out like Shania Rawson did when Kate Weatherly first transitioned over to the female category, she was just absolutely slaughtered on social media, and even worse still, Cycling New Zealand basically told her that she just needed to try harder, as if she could overcome that biological advantage that Kate Weatherly had, being born a male. So, and we saw that as well with the Penn swimmers, Penn State University, with the swimmer Leah Thomas, who won the NCAA final. That when they spoke out, they were told they had to be quiet. They were given counselling to deal with it, which was even more insulting. But, their voices were just shut down.
And you have young women in the changing sheds with a guy who's pretending to be a woman who's still got all the male equipment.
Yeah, you do. And, we have a huge drop-off in the female participation rate in schools already in teenage years. It's just massive. You put a male in the female changing rooms with girls at that age,
it's abuse.
They're not going to be comfortable. But
it's abuse. Just hold that thought, Ro, and I'll jump across to Candice. I'll come back. Candice, good morning. How are you?
Yeah, hey, good, thank you.
I'm so honoured to be speaking to you.
Oh,
because,
same to you.
You're a tremendous athlete and you're a tremendous leader, and I would say in a heroic way to be speaking out. So first of all, tell us about your sport.
So I competed in rowing and triathlon. I started in rowing at school. My school had a really strong and successful rowing program at the time, and there was real pride in that, and I could see that in my peers who were part of those teams and successful.
Did you love rowing?
I was able to go and love it.
Did you love?
I did. Yeah.
What did you love about it?
Yeah.
What did you love about rowing?
What did I love about it? I don't know. It was a really tough sport. You do build a lot of resilience. You build deep relationships with the people you're with because you see them at their best and at their worst. And I don't know. There's something about being out on the water. The
reason I ask is, I'm not trying to be rude, but my wife's keen for our daughters to do rowing, and I look at it and I think, man, that looks so hard. And you're just pushing and pushing and pushing. And my wife's saying similar to you. You're in a team, you're out on the water, it's fresh air, and it's just this great team spirit.
Well, actually, just as you've said that, when you are pushing and you're working together with other people, and you create this rhythm in the boat, and as you technically get better and better, that rhythm becomes really smooth and fast and efficient, and I guess it's an amazing feeling.
I can see that now, finally, when you describe it like that. Oh, wow, because you become like a machine.
Yep, you do. And, there's, I don't know, the sense of pride of when you achieve that, and you just want to keep going back to get that feeling again and build off it. And
then you did triathlon?
Yeah, so I pursued rowing until I was about 24 or 25, and I had a lot of setbacks in that time. We tried to qualify for the Olympics, and I didn't make the cut, and so eventually, it just got to the point where it was time to move on. And I think with that rowing routine, it's really intense. Like, you get up every morning, you train, I go to work and then train in the afternoon, and that was my routine for a number of years. And so when I left, it was a really hard habit to break. So I started training for a marathon, and then this eventually led to iron distance events. And that you swim 3.8k, you cycle 180k, and then you run a marathon with 42k. Eventually I met a coach who suggested I could start pursuing it professionally. And under his guidance, I was finally able to earn an income from competing, and I raced 14 of those races, as well as a raft of other endurance events throughout New Zealand and around the world. And I mean, I'm just extremely grateful for those experiences and the opportunity that I had and the people I met, and it's really enriched my life. But there's only small windows of opportunity in life, and we need to grab them when we can. And I guess I want to make sure that other females also experience that, because it's a really fine line as to whether you can continue with this or not. It's really difficult.
Are you still a professional triathlete, or have you retired from professional sport?
I retired, so I fell pregnant, which was unplanned, and I went back for another year after having my son, but then I retired in 2016. I'd lost the drive for it.
Good for you, and good for you having a child. Now tell me, how did you get into this transgender debate and be prepared to put your head up? Because to me, I'm not that brave.
Well, firstly, I don't think it's brave. I think it's just it's common sense, and we should be able to just have this discussion. But yeah, I have had to sort of think quite a bit about how how did I get so deep into this? But it all actually started when I was on this Mother's Weekend Away with a play centre group, and we got into this big debate one evening around gender and whether a person could change their gender. And one woman, she really supported these ideas, and she was explaining that in the future sport would be divided based on our physical traits, not sex categories, which seemed really far-fetched because there's just too many variables. But also because of my background and experience in sport, I understood that practical, fundamental reality that male and female bodies we just have different requirements. We respond to training loads differently. We develop differently. And there's decades of sporting records that highlight all of these physical advantages. It's common knowledge. And, we're having this discussion. And then I remembered, the boys at school who competed at Māori, it was a rite of passage for them. This is for rowing. It was a rite of passage for them to be able to beat the women's world record on the rowing machine, which at the time was held by an Olympic gold medalist, Georgina Evers-Swindell. And so these boys, they are 16, 17, 18 years old, and they're already faster than women who have been training full-time for a number of years. They're at their pinnacle fitness, or peak fitness, I should say. And, so those physical distinctions in sport are very clear. To me, I think it's common.
It's obvious to every parent.
Why is this even happening? Yeah.
Yeah, we don't even need to have that discussion and that debate.
We are now, and
I know. Let's come back to that in a minute. You're so wonderful. You're so passionate. You're so wonderful. So you have put your head above the parapet. You've organised. You've got with Ro, and you're doing this. What prompted you to go to the next step? I have strong feelings, but I just keep them a bit to myself. You've actually gone out there, and what prompted you? Was it just that discussion? Was it researching it? Tell me the next step that happened.
Well, part of that discussion was also I saw there was one of my friends became also really upset because she explained that she had been subject to a sexual attack, which 1 in 4 women have been, and she is just vehemently against the male regardless of identity in a female-only space. So there were some really strong emotions coming through from this discussion. So I picked up on all this, and then I guess from there I just started watching on the fringes what was going on, and Laurel Hubbard kind of came on the scene, and I read an article about Tracy Lambridge,
yes.
And she said that the situation wasn't fair and that female athletes were trying to speak out, but they were told to be quiet. And I just found that really shocking to hear, because it's clearly undermining women's sport on a world stage at a pinnacle event. And so from there I started learning more and engaging and trying to understand what's going on. And that's when I met Rowena, and she explained that this inclusion of gender identities was also coming through all of our community sport under the directive of Grant Robertson. So I started just writing to MPs and just started writing and trying to engage more and more in the process. And the more I did that, the more I realised how they were all really supportive of this. They just support.
It's shocking. I'm going to hold you there and go back to Ro for a minute. I'm sorry I have to keep jumping around, but you're doing a great job. And now, Ro,
Hi.
could you hear Candice okay?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Oh, good.
I'm so incredibly proud of her because it does take a lot of strength to stand up.
Oh, my God.
In this. So, yeah, so proud.
Absolutely. Now, tell me, where has this nonsense come from?
Unfortunately, it's come from the top. The IOC, I think in 2015, they changed their policy where they had a policy before where males who identified as trans could have a sex change operation and then compete in the female category. There obviously wasn't many because most people that transitioned then were males that were older. So it never really fell into the realms of sport. In 2015, they changed their policy so that all males had to do was lower their testosterone to under 10 nanomoles per millilitre for a period of 12 months. So, which is basically at least 5 times as much testosterone as a female will ever have. And, they've had the advantage of that testosterone through growing up through the teenage years to develop all of the, the attributes that males have that give them that biological advantage over females. And then from there,
just hold that thought. The International Olympic Committee decided to do that. So I could be a very good sportsman, but no chance of getting to the Olympics, right? But I could just lower my testosterone and compete as a woman.
Yeah, pretty much. You need to live as a woman, whatever that means.
Yeah. Now, why on earth would the International Olympic Committee agree to that absurdity?
Because they were approached by a male transgender athlete who lobbied them. The trans lobbied them incredibly hard, and so they just decided to ignore science, public opinion, common sense, and just undermine the female category. It just honestly it begged belief that every national sporting association followed suit because they looked to the IOC. They thought the IOC had done the proper research, understood the issues, but they hadn't. They'd received one flawed study from a trans athlete that was all it was just so flawed all the way through, and they based their decision on that. Meanwhile, females have had to fight for decades and decades to get female categories into the Olympics. It's been a massive, massive battle, but our voices have been ignored all the way through, and on this, totally ignored. Then we started to see a turnaround. So World Rugby in 2020, they went through and undertook a really thorough consultation, research, just everything, and came to the conclusion that there was no way that you could combine fairness with safety, especially within rugby, and inclusion as well. And so they brought out their transgender guidelines. But then what happened is the trans lobby basically targeted every national union around the world to get them not to adopt World Rugby's guidelines. And the one mistake World Rugby made was that they didn't make it mandatory for national unions to adopt them. I wish they had. So what the New Zealand Rugby Union did is they were under intense lobbying as well, and we were speaking to them too. But they capitulated and decided that they would undergo their own process. So they approached Sport New Zealand to get some funding for that. Sport New Zealand said, look, if we're going to create trans inclusion policies for you, let's create guidelines for every sport. And Grant Robertson had directed that inclusion had to be the priority. So really, the development of the policy the outcomes were already written because of what Grant Robertson was dictating from the top. So that's how we've ended up with Sport New Zealand.
And of course, government funds a lot of sport.
Yeah, they do. They do. And so Sport New Zealand have written these guidelines, and as we understand it, the New Zealand Rugby Football Union are currently consulting on similar guidelines which allow anyone to self-ID into the sporting category they want. No medical, no surgical transition is required. So, Rodney, you could turn up and at a sport tomorrow and say, I identify as a woman and I want to play in the female category, and sports would have to say yes.
I don't think people can grasp, unless they have young kids that are going through the system and realising how much this has infiltrated every aspect of schooling and sport, and the dramatic impact it is going to have, literally having now and going to have in the next little while, because as I understand it, there used to be a condition called gender dysphoria, where maybe 1 in 100,000 people would be identifying as a gender other than their anatomical sex. But that what I've noticed is there is now like a program of saying it's okay to be trans, it's okay to be bi, it's okay to be all these things, and kids at primary school are now identifying as trans.
Yeah, but it's not just that it's okay to be those things, because it should be. We should be able to express ourselves who we want to be, but it's the indoctrination that is actually happening at primary and secondary schools now, where kids are basically told they can be 100 different genders, that they can be gender fluid, they can be all of these things, and these kids' minds, they just absorb everything. And so you're getting this total confusion about who they are. So what we've done is gone from basically having, we've gone back to reinforcing those old gender stereotypes where if you're a girl and you like blue and you've got short hair and you play football, well, maybe you were born in the wrong body and you should be a male. Rather than saying, wow, there's a girl who likes football and short hair and that's so cool, and accepting her for who she is, we're now telling her that actually she should be that. She doesn't conform to that gender stereotype. She should be this.
There's something very, very dark, and I hesitate to use the word, but it's the one that I find myself reaching for, satanic almost, about the nastiness and the intensity with which this lobbying and pushing has gone on, and about the effect of it on little kiddies.
Yeah, and there's no debate. You're not allowed to have the debate.
Not allowed to debate it. And of course, I'm with you. If someone wants to call themselves a hedgehog, they can, but don't come along to the hedgehog race. You know what I mean? And compete.
Yeah, don't make everyone call you a hedgehog, because you're not a hedgehog.
Yeah. Now, so this, and of course, another thing to appreciate is this isn't just professional sport or sport at the top level. This is coming everywhere.
Yeah, community sport. And, community sport is our pipeline to elite sport. What we've found really frustrating, like dealing with Sport New Zealand on their consultation process, is we just did an OIA recently to Sport New Zealand asking about their advice around the Human Rights Act, because it's very specific in Section 49, and it says nothing shall prevent the exclusion of persons of one sex from participating in a competitive sporting category and where strength, stamina, or physique of competitors is relevant. So that's sports, the female category in sport we thought was protected by that Section 49. But the Human Rights Commission has actually given Sport New Zealand an opinion saying that this doesn't apply to community sport, as if strength, stamina and physique had no bearing on community sport. So it seems like Sport New Zealand, our Minister Grant Robertson, they're all who's leading the charge on this, they all believe that females only play to participate, which is quite frankly insulting, because I can tell you right now, if my daughter or my niece or myself, didn't know that we could win through hard work and effort, we'd just stop participating. Like, what's the point? Put our energy somewhere else. But this whole insinuation, and, we saw it in that Kiwi blog article you mentioned, is how you heard about Candice's opinion piece.
Yes.
Is that, we even have like David Farrier thinking that it's community sport doesn't matter.
I know.
That females don't to win in community sport. But if we don't win in community sport, we are never going to make it to that elite level.
But it's not even that, right? I doubt my girls will ever make it to the elite level. But my goodness, for their school years, they love sport. They live for sport.
Yeah.
And it's not about them being, representing New Zealand at the Olympics or being the top. They just love getting in there and competing. Just like Candace was saying, that sense of being part of a team, of you learn, you develop, you learn. They're not going to do that if boys turn up saying they're girls, and they will be doing this at 11, and there's nothing a sporting body can do.
Yeah, we had a mum contact us who is, she's a volunteer for her regional cricket club, or local cricket club, and she took her daughter's team over to a tournament, and I think it was in Napier, and there was a male who identified as a female, like a 11-year-old male, that was participating in this tournament and staying in the girls' accommodations, which were all dormitories as well, and he was obviously far superior to any of the other girls that were playing at that tournament. Obviously far superior, and so she raised concerns after that. But yeah, and all the kids knew. They all quietly said, "This is really unfair." Like you're saying, your daughter.
Were they?
They were 11 and 12.
And this is in New Zealand.
This is in New Zealand. It's happening everywhere. But people are so scared to speak out. We get contacted by people about what's happening. Netball, for instance. Netball in some regions have implemented a policy where 2 males can play in a netball team in the premier grade. A lot of high school teams actually play in that premier grade of netball, teams of girls, and they're going in against a team that can have at least, have a maximum of 2 males on the court at any one time. These girls are just getting overwhelmed by these males on the team to the point where they've gone back to their school and tried to get some males to come into their team so that they can actually be competitive. What that does is that leaves females on the sideline. Females who that team was created for are sitting on the sideline watching guys who the sport isn't their passion go into their team just so they can be competitive against other teams where males have been brought in. We have female sport for a reason. We separate based on sex for very, very good reasons. And, it's, in reality, inclusion is nothing more than a form of eligibility. We categorise and subcategorise athletes, so we see maximal inclusion.
The concept of inclusion that they use is a violence on language, and it's Orwellian, isn't it? It's a double speak. Because
it is, because inclusion of them means exclusion of females.
Absolutely. There'll be no women's sport. There'll be no girls wanting to play. And it is the most... and it's hateful of women. It's anti-woman. It is the most shocking thing. And this has happened, and when did this start, and how quick have we got to hear that 11 and 12-year-olds are having to go away with boys who sleep in their dormitory saying they're girls and compete against them? I mean, you'd never heard of this a few years back, right? It would just be inconceivable.
No, and under Sport New Zealand's guidelines, if the females complain or raise concerns, they're the ones that undergo disciplinary action.
Let me go back to Candice, Ro. Look, I could talk to you all day. I could talk to Candice all day, and I'm sure our listeners love it, but I sort of want to swap around a bit. Candice, what's the feeling, because you keep in touch, I imagine, what's the feeling with young women in sport?
As Rowena was just saying that, we are hearing from women, or girls and women at community level sport. We're hearing from the ones that have left. So they've been injured. They're not comfortable in changing rooms. They've told, in one case that I know of, a manager of a facility that they weren't comfortable, and they were told to just be more tolerant of the situation. So I think if it's impacting any female at all, it needs to stop, because it is their category, it's their single-sex space, and they have a right to that space.
I am speechless. So you could be a young girl, 13, 14, 15, 17, 11, and you go off to your sport. It could be swimming, it could be cycling, it could be jiu-jitsu, it could be rugby, it could be soccer, it could be netball, and you're getting changed, and there are a couple of boys there getting changed.
Yeah, so this is already happening, yeah. Yeah,
and you're saying, ooh, I tell you what, if I was a parent, that would be, I can't imagine. So they complain and the management say, get with the program, you've got to be more tolerant.
Yes, yeah.
So
yeah. So in that case...
And then you go out and compete and you haven't got a chance, and depending on the sport, you could be hurt.
Mm. Yeah, and it always comes back to why do we have these categories? And it's to ensure that being born female is not a disadvantage. So we have those fair and equal opportunities to experience success.
If you look at it, and you look at Grant Robinson, right? He's not stupid, right? I disagree with him about everything, but he's not stupid. What do you think he's thinking about this?
I don't think they're not considering the real world application of how this works. So, on one level, I think we should applaud Sport New Zealand for creating inclusive guidelines, because I do understand that they are trying to navigate this space, but it's also really frustrating because they could have had a really positive opportunity to have this discussion, create fair and inclusive guidelines, which you're talking about before about acknowledging a person's gender presentation that may be different to our gender stereotypes, and still respect those people, but simply just acknowledge that biological sex exists. And so what Sport New Zealand has done, I guess, and what Grant Robinson has supported, is they have removed that fundamental definition of sex, which the definition is that sex is fixed and it's immutable. And they're now saying that it's not fixed and it's not immutable, and apparently there's the science that proves it. But we haven't seen this conclusive science, and I keep reading all these international sporting bodies who are going ahead and creating an open division for transgender athletes to protect the female category. But Sport New Zealand is still adamant that they have this evidence, which no one else has, which says that sex is changeable, and therefore anyone can compete in the category that they identify with. So
you must take great heart from Caitlyn Jenner, formerly Bruce Jenner, who was a fabulous athlete. I'm old enough to remember him competing in the New Zealand Games, decathlete, and he's transitioned to a lady, and he says it's nuts.
Yeah. Well, he would understand as well because of his physical.
Yeah, he was a man. He was 100% man, and man, could he compete. I mean, he was a gold medalist, and he's now decided he'd be more comfortable in a female's body. I can't begin to get my head there, but okay. And then he says, no way should men, transsexuals or men declaring themselves to be a woman, and as you say, you only actually have to suppress testosterone for a limited period and live like a woman, and suddenly you don't even have to go through getting your parts cut off, as horrific as that sounds, to end up competing. It's a stroke. I've observed around the world that when prominent people like J.K. Rowling speak up against this, they get absolutely viciously attacked and trolled and deplatformed, and people say, I'll never work with her again, don't buy her books, burn her books, don't publish her books. Have you had any of that negativity yourself?
No, not at all. But, I mean, I don't have a high profile. Yes. No, I've only received support. Yeah.
I bet you've received
No
a lot
one
of
getting
support.
into my face. I mean, yeah.
And your organisation is called Save Women's Sport Australasia. Why? I understand it's your call, but why Australia and New Zealand together?
That's probably back to Rowena because she co-founded it with Catherine Dees. So
Yep.
I've only engaged with Rowena since last year, but I think they started about 3 years ago. So, yeah.
So I'll go back to Rowena and we'll talk about this, but anyone that's interested in finding out about Save Women's Sport Australasia, Google it. They have a wonderful webpage. Please donate to these women because it's for literally, to me, our country's sake. Ro, going back to you, why is it Australia and New Zealand?
So we did start off Save Women's Sport New Zealand, but I was contacted there's a Senator Claire Chandler over in Australia, in the Australian Senate, who contacted me to say that there was a lady over in Australia who wanted to set up something similar to ourselves. Could I chat to her? And we ended up chatting and decided that we're both fighting the same battles, the same types of legislation. And so we were stronger as a united voice than two separate entities, which is why we invited them to join forces. And it has been really beneficial.
So what do you do as this body?
I guess we lobby a lot. We've contacted sports from club level to regional level to national level to highlight what the issues are and our concerns about what Sport New Zealand, the direction that they're going. Last year, was it last year or the year before? I start losing track. We when Sport New Zealand put this policy, these guidelines out, the first draft, the consultation was incredibly limited. There were very few sports that were involved with it. It was lots of academics, rainbow organisations, and us. We lobbied Sport New Zealand with open letter from 70-odd New Zealand elite athletes, all retired because we didn't want to get any current athletes involved due to the potential pushback from sponsors, etc. And that we presented a letter to Grant Robertson. It actually got news coverage on that one, although the journalist who did that was pretty much hammered on social media and email for a couple of days and is too scared to touch the subject again, unfortunately. But that's just the way these things work. But yeah, we do a lot of lobbying. We do a lot of awareness raising, but it's all based on, we're a team of a very small team of volunteers.
Yes.
And
Let me just hold you there. Now, do you like to be called Ro or your full name?
Ro, it's fine, thanks.
I'm sorry because you emailed me as Ro and I've been calling you Ro. Now, let me just read a few texts. Let me just take a few texts because people are asking, am I reading the texts? Yes, I'm reading the texts. And someone wanted to know about Alwyn Pool and how to Google it. It's the Mount Hobson Academy. And if you Google the Mount Hobson Academy, you'll find more about Alwyn and what he's doing with school. Here's a great text from Warren. Finally, women sticking up for real women in sport. Bloody madness. Even I, as a male, I sit there watching saying that's a bloke. Women sprinting in middle distance races are becoming a farce. Good morning, Rodney. What an interesting subject. Not sure if you're reading the text machine. Yes, I am. But if you are, could you discuss how this trans movement completely violates the basic rights of women? Yes, we will ask you this. And then, Rodney, you've got to get Robertson on to answer these accusations and get him to explain himself. It does violate the basic rights of a woman, doesn't it, Ro?
Yeah, well, we believe it does, and women have actually been speaking out about this for years now. It's just that, once again, our voices are shut down. We saw Matt Walsh he's a US conservative, put out the film What is a Woman?
I watched that maybe when I became slowly aware of this I watched that show. I loved that show. I love Matt Walsh. You carry on.
Yeah, and he did a great job, and he's received lots of acclaim for that. But women have been saying the same thing, and there's been movies put out by them over the last 4 or 5 years as well, and they've been completely ignored. So we don't like to think that we live in a society that still does this, but it does.
Well, my two girls go to Arrowtown Primary School, which they love. They tell me that they know 7 non-binary kids, right, which is inconceivable to me. They won't go to the toilet at school.
The 7 non-binary.
No, because they're unisex toilets and the guys all make a mess. The boys make a mess. And I mean, they're not having to share, well, they don't share the toilet simultaneously, which if they go along to a sport, they may have to. But even just the idea of a 9-year-old girl going in and the boys peed all over the seat.
Yeah, but I know females that are at universities that have gender-neutral toilets only, and the girls do not go to the toilet all day. They withhold liquid, so they do not have to use those facilities. There is nothing good about gender-neutral toilets for females. Nothing at all. Apart from the pee, it's the danger, The
danger, the total danger. It is absolutely horrific. And it feels to me, Ro, as it's just happened. I went to sleep one night and everything was okay. I knew what a woman was. I knew what a man was. I knew why we had women's sport and men's sport. I knew why we had women's toilets and changing rooms and men's toilets and changing rooms. And then I woke up and suddenly, oh my God, you can't have a woman's toilet and a men's toilet. You've got to be inclusive. You can't have women's sport. You've got to... But it seems to me as though it's just happened.
Well, the government, Labor government, has been pushing this agenda since they got in. They tried to push through the sex self-ID legislation in their first term, but we managed to get it put on hold.
Oh, I'm sorry. You have to hold that there. What is the sex self-ID legislation?
So in the Births, Deaths and Marriages Act, they were updating the Act, and it went through the first reading, and then after the first reading and after it had been out for public submission, the Labor and the Greens added in a clause that allowed people to change the sex on their birth certificate just by declaration only. Before, there was quite a big process. You had to go through the family court to get it done, so it minimised the number of people that would do that. You had to really be someone who honestly believed you were born in the wrong body and show evidence that you were living as the other sex. Labor and the Greens wanted to change that to just a statutory declaration, which they did last year. But because they couldn't do it the first time, it didn't stop them pushing this agenda through every government department. And so
their policy, just let me get this right, their policy, the Labor and the Greens, had a policy, and we're going to change legislation, but got lobbied out of it. They were going to have it that I could decide to be a woman and get my birth certificate changed.
Well, they've done that now. So that legislation has gone through now, and that's the justification that Sport New Zealand are using to say that people can literally change sex, because we allow that on our birth certificates now.
Hang on. So I'm still I was born on the 16th of December 1956, and as I recall, I think there's a birth certificate and it says I'm a boy. I could get that birth certificate and I could change that to me being a girl.
Yeah.
And what do I need to do?
Yeah, but it can change it numerous times too now. It's not just once.
So I change it to a girl.
As well.
I change it to a girl, then I could go to a girls' school.
Well, this is a big problem, isn't it? Like, girls-only schools. Yeah, we've got instances now in Auckland where they're trying to remove the word girls from girls' schools because of the trans boys, now the girls that identify as boys or non-binary, that go to these schools that don't want to be recognised as girls. So we've all got to validate them while ignoring, there's this whole erasure of girls and women going on in our legislation and our societies. It's just complete, utter madness.
Isn't it extraordinary, Ro, that women have had to work so incredibly hard politically to be treated as full human beings? Because not that long ago, a woman couldn't own property, a woman was owned by her husband effectively, a woman couldn't vote, a woman couldn't be, a whole lot of jobs were denied women. Not that long ago, women couldn't be an astronomer. And women have worked so hard to get this recognition as full human adult citizens, not the same as a man, but equivalent to a man in terms of the law.
Yeah, and now, we've got a group called Speak Out for Women who have been fighting all of this for quite a while. They couldn't even put up a billboard with the dictionary definition of woman in Wellington. It was put up, taken down within 24 hours. They couldn't run ads in local newspapers with the dictionary definition of woman. There's just this total erasure of women going on in society right now. And you're right, it hasn't been that long since, we actually had decent rights to spaces and places specifically for females that gave us similar opportunities to guys.
And of course, it wasn't that long ago. Was it only in the 80s that they opened up the marathon to women? Hello, Ro?
Are you there?
Sorry, Ro, I just clipped you. It was only in the 80s that they opened up the marathon to women.
Yeah, and I think boxing was early 2000s. Skiing, a lot of the ski events were only relatively recent because, seriously, one of the head guys at the International Ski Organisation thought that, women doing ski jumps was dangerous, our insides might fall out. Seriously.
I've got a text here. I've got a text here saying, awesome, discuss and thank you. I'm a 54-year-old woman and I will not use gender-neutral toilets. Therefore, I don't go out as much anymore. They're dirty and unsafe. I feel so sorry for girls at school. Well, it's absolutely right. I mean, my goodness. Now, are you winning?
We're making progress. I mean, Sport New Zealand had hoped to push through their guidelines in a relatively short time. We've lengthened that by at least a year already, and we keep applying the pressure. But to win, we need everybody to speak up. It can't be just a few of us. So, all of those listening, please, contact your local sporting clubs, your regional sports organisations, your national sports organisations. They're all right now having to rethink their policies because Sport New Zealand are pushing these guidelines down on them. And, from their perspective too, Sport New Zealand have basically said that their funding might be at risk if they don't adopt them as well. So this is how much push is going in behind this. But the more that people speak up against this, the more that we have a chance of winning this battle.
Because you'll wake up and be too late. What is Sports New Zealand?
Sport New Zealand, well, it's the government-funded sporting entity that basically funds all sports in New Zealand. So they run high performance sport. Yeah, they're our national sporting entity.
And Grant Robinson is their minister.
Yes, and he has appointed their board as well. He basically tells them what to do.
And you see, the interesting thing is my girls and my son, they have taken up jiu-jitsu, which is a lovely, lovely sport. And I've had Steve Oliver on, and they had a competition at the weekend, and I was thinking about our interview, and the difference between the boys and girls is night and day. And I chatted to Steve Oliver about it, and, there's no way that Steve Oliver would agree to any of this nonsense. But the fascinating thing is, it may be taken entirely out of his hands, because you can imagine the Human Rights Commission coming along and saying this is what the law is. You can imagine activists turning up and entering a boy and a girl's competition and shutting him down or fining him or arresting him. I mean, none of this is beyond the grounds of possibility that he can't run unless he is, quote, inclusive, because this is the way they've managed to grab the language.
Yeah, look, Boxing New Zealand shared their submission to Sport New Zealand's guidelines with us, and in it they outlined how they actually consulted with the Rainbow community to try and come up with a solution. The Rainbow community came back and they asked for at least 12 different categories, each reflecting a distinction in identity. It basically meant if they put the 12 different transgender categories over their 13 different weight categories, they would have 156 categories for transgender participation. It just blew out, and they've gone back to Sport New Zealand and said, look, we cannot do this while enabling fairness and safety for our females. And he might have used, the president might have used a bit of colourful language in there, but it was all honest. It was about how he felt. And the response from Sport New Zealanders was that he needs re-educating. And it just beggars belief in a sport like boxing, where the punching power of a male, I think, is 160% more than a female, that Sport New Zealand would be pushing for this nonsense in contact sports, let alone in non-contact. It's just a total lack of care for female athletes.
I guarantee I had educated myself a little bit on this in these past few weeks. And I had watched Matt Walsh, and I loved his show, These People Can't Tell You What a Woman Is. And I have become, through my daughters at primary school, aware of what's going on. But I'm sitting here listening to you, and my jaw is on the desk. I truly can't believe that it's got to this stage.
But you wouldn't know. The media refuse to talk about it. That's why I love the platform, because you guys have these conversations. But, we cannot get our mainstream media to discuss this. I sent out a press release on Saturday morning about England Rugby making the decision, like they reversed their trans inclusion policy after 2 years because of real issues with it. And they've created a policy now that separates again by sex. And they're given all of the problems that we have with New Zealand Rugby Union right now, and the fact that they're pushing through a policy that would allow males to play females in a contact sport like rugby, not one other media outlet has picked it up. Not one.
Can you imagine the sort of sickos that this opens up our girls' sports to?
Yeah, and unfortunately we have those in society. There's not that many of them, but there doesn't need to be that many for them to have a big impact.
Oh man, Ro. I'm going to have to move and go to Candice and then call it quits, I'm afraid. Would you please come on again and talk more about this?
Oh, I would love to, and thank you so much for having us, Rodney.
Can you tell us again how people contact you to help you?
So SaveWomenSports.com is our website. We're on Facebook as well, Save Women Sport Australasia. We have a newsletter that you can sign up to through our website, but, Facebook is a really good way. We're also on Twitter as well. So, just Google Save Women Sport Australasia. Look, we'd love any support we could get. We'd love everyone's voices added to ours, because it just makes us stronger.
I'm almost in tears thinking about this and what this means for little girls and, my girls. If that happened once in a changing room or a dormitory, my kids, I'd have them out of that. I would have them out of the sport and I'd be abusing the management. But the tricky thing is I can't, because they're just doing what they're told. Whoa. Yeah. Thanks, Ro. I'll go to Candice. Candice, you are truly, truly wonderful.
Oh. Well, Rowena's done such a great job and really pushing all of this, and I'm grateful for her and for the other women in our group who are working really hard behind the scenes. We are writing so many letters. We're trying to engage with the media. I just wanted to speak to that text you had before that said, finally women are speaking out. Well, I've written a couple opinion pieces that I sent through to staff in the Herald, and the feedback I received was I had used the term biological male, and they said that's considered hate speech, or that it's well written but we can't publish it. So, we have been trying for a long time.
Okay, well, more strength to your arm. People sign up. Candice Riley, so lovely to have you on. Thank you so much, and thank you so much for your work. Have a lovely day and keep at it. And I will sign up for your newsletter. Thank you so much. Thanks. We're off to the news, everyone. Thank you for that. What a wonderful interview. What a wonderful couple of women.